Hi, sir. My name's Lawrence. So sometimes people call me Chunk.
Art 101 with Mr. Burgher.
Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Art 101 with me, Mr. Burgher, a professional artist and master educator attempting to bring you the best in art historical content. Today, we're going to check out the Cincinnati Art Museum. Let's go inside and show you a few things. Alright, so this is my very first trip to the Cincinnati Art Museum, and it has a really cool collection. I'm going to break down some of my favorites from the 6 different zones or categories that they have throughout the museum. Those 6 areas include ancient art, African art, American art, Asian and Islamic art, European art, and modern and contemporary art. And because these are scattered throughout the building, I'm going to show you in a more timeline fashion, going from the oldest to the more contemporary works. So we're going to start with this work. Now this is a silver piece coming from Central Asia, maybe even Iran and the Middle East, going all the way back to 550 BC. And it's known as drinking vessel with kneeling bowl. And it looks to me a little bit like a Rhyton, which is a horn-shaped vessel that was used to add air into wine to enhance the taste. And we see a lot of these things coming out of ancient societies. Greeks, Romans, Middle Eastern cultures oftentimes used Rhytons. So anyway, I think that's what this might possibly be. Anyway, moving on. This is a stone relief from about 500 BC. And this was a relief that once was in the palace of Xerxes at a very famous location in Persepolis. There would have been hundreds of these sorts of carvings that decorated the palace, and what a great example of Persian relief carving. This piece is a marble lion which was used as a funerary monument or grave marker and dates back to about 350 BC. Now for the Greeks, this is one of their very favorite and most popular types of grave markers. The lion was oftentimes used as a grave marker. It is believed that this was used as a funeral marker for some sort of a military leader or military officer. So, here we go. The Cincinnati Art Museum has 2 pieces that are from ancient Greece, and they're wares that are decorated in the black figure technique. But we're going to focus on this one. This is a black figure ware that is decorated with Heracles. Now Heracles, also known as Hercules, was one of the great Greek heroes who was very famous for his 12 great feats that he had accomplished. And here's a depiction of his first great feat, the defeating of this great lion. Now you can find out more information on this on my other video, specifically on ancient Greece that I recently did, but I digress. Let's move forward.
The final labor is complete.
Now this is a work that's kind of interesting. It is by an artist by the name of El Greco, or the Greek. And it's a work from about 1605 to 1610 called Christ on the Cross with a View of Toledo. And Toledo is a town in Spain, which I have actually visited, and they have some really cool murals there. But again, I digress, so let's keep moving forward. Now El Greco is mostly known for his religious type paintings, and of course this is an example of that. For a Renaissance era artist, he definitely had his own style and technique that he was implementing in his works. And in this we see a very high contrast type painting of Christ on the crucifix, and down below of course we see the city of Toledo. And there would be many artists that would put crucifixion type scenes in their own contemporary time periods or in their own contemporary locations and things like that. And El Greco is one that very much influenced others in that practice. Marching on ahead. Anton Mauve was an artist from the Netherlands who was pretty well known for his paintings of farm life, particularly sheep herding and things like that, and this is a prime example of his work. Created around 1880, this painting is an oil on canvas and very much shows a great example of work that's going on at this time as a Dutch realist painter. Now here's an interesting fact about Mauve. Now Mauve was married to Vincent van Gogh's cousin, and because of that family tie, Mauve would be the only artist ever to give Vincent van Gogh any sort of informal, formal training, other than other artists that tried to impart techniques and advice onto him. Another realist, Edouard Manet, is also included in the Cincinnati Art Museum, and this one from 1865 called The Women at the Races is a relatively small painting, but originally it was a bigger painting and he just kind of chopped it up to fit this smaller scale for one reason or another. And it really is a good example of Manet's realistic work at this particular time in the 1860s. Alright, now I know I've gone on a little bit of a tangent with the realist, but one last one that I want to cover is this painting by Gustave Courbet, kind of the master of the realist painters. From 1873, A Gorge in the Jura is a painting that he did in southern France, not too far from his hometown. And his direct and very carefully executed observations are exceptional, and this is why he truly is one of the masters of realistic painting. Now let's move on down the road to Impressionism. Regarded as one of the founders of Impressionism, Claude Monet created this painting in 1886, on location, as the title reflects, at the Rocks at Belle-Île, Port-au-Domos. He arrived with the intention of staying for 15 days, but he would end up staying for 75 days, working on no less than 39 canvases during his time on the island. He would write about this by saying, "I've been here for a month, and I'm grinding away. I'm in a magnificent region of wilderness, a tremendous heap of rocks and sea, unbelievable for its colors. Well, I'm very enthusiastic."
Honey, speak the language. Going to be very nice. Just try.
There's this interesting sculpture, Eve Hearing the Voice, which was cast in 1904 by artist Moses J. Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel is a name that I'm not really familiar with. However, I have discovered that he's a native of Virginia that transplanted to Cincinnati, Ohio. And the Cincinnati Art Museum has a whole wing section dedicated to Cincinnati artists, and this is a part of that collection. But as always, remember that when visiting an art place that their collections will rotate, the pieces that are on display will rotate, and so always be mindful of those facts when you are visiting. So onward we go. 1922, Pablo Picasso is working in a very neoclassical sort of style. Now, the historical reference to neoclassicism doesn't really apply to Picasso at all, but after a trip to Italy, Picasso was very much influenced by what he saw and wanted to revisit some old styles of his own. So the works that he was making in the early 1920s very much reflect that, and in 1922 he was creating several works based around this female figure, who is oftentimes a representation of his first wife, Olga Koklava, who had just bore his first son, Paulo. Alright, so up next. Daughters of the Revolution is a work by fellow Iowan and an American regionalist Grant Wood. This is a work that is an oil painting on a piece of masonite, created in 1932. This painting is created to memorialize the annual tea outing with the Daughters of the American Revolution and the festivities around the bicentennial of our first president's birthday. Of course, behind them we see a print of Washington crossing the Delaware, and because of Wood's personal objection to this group, he would omit the word American from the title and strategically place this print behind, which was created by a German artist, and them holding Chinese tea ware. So, now you know. Here's a work by the liberator of color, Henri Matisse. This oil on canvas was painted in 1937 entitled Romy and Blouse. And at this time in his career, he was commissioned to do some set work for a big production of a ballet performance using Stravinsky's First Symphony. But anyway, he created several paintings at this time in 37 that included models with very elaborate costumes and flower arrangements and leaf arrangements, due to his influence of the music and the sets and all of the other things that he was doing at this time. You can check out more about Matisse in my video specifically about him, but anyway, that's for another time.
It's the only way you'll learn. Okay,
Let's take a look at this 1963 work by Mark Rothko, Brown, Orange, Blue on Maroon. Now, Rothko is a very influential color field artist, meaning that he would work with large areas of blocks of solid color and layer these colors up to show weight, to show depth, and to show intensity of these various colors. What a magnificent example. Moving forward. Now this piece is done by Deborah Butterfield, an American sculptor who largely creates these life-scale statues of sorts of horses. This one in particular, horse number 1, made in 1983, was created out of metal, wood, and mud, and each one is said to reflect a particular personality. I really like these particular types of works from the standpoint that they are so fragile, and how do you move these things around? It's very just interesting to me how these are constructed and preserved in a museum setting like this. But Deborah Butterfield, an absolute master at sculpture, really did a fantastic job on this particular work. And the next work up, Pete Rose, done by Andy Warhol in 1985. Now this is a piece that was commissioned by the Cincinnati Art Museum by Andy Warhol himself in June of 1985 in anticipation of Pete Rose's record-breaking 4,192nd hit in the major leagues. The design is very much based on a baseball card style image. There was some question as to whether the painting would be done in time, and Andy Warhol had the painting delivered to Cincinnati on September the 9th, and it was installed in the museum on the 10th. Amazingly enough, on September the 11th, 1985, Pete Rose would break Ty Cobb's all-time record for hits, so everything seemed to work out very well.
I don't want to live in the past unless you want to talk about how many hits I got.
Artist Anselm Kiefer is a German artist that grew up in the post-World War II era. Because of he and his family's experiences, a lot of his work really has a focus or a bit of an undercurrent of that experience. I've seen many of his works, very, very powerful, and this one, Montsalvat from 1996, is no exception. This particular work really revolves around the music of Richard Wagner, one of Germany's most prevalent and popular composers. Anyway, this work is a little bit unique in that it has a little bit more to do with this musical than it does about something historical, but much of his work is tied to German history, German culture, and this, in that way, is no exception. Now this work, Leaping Tabby, by Esther Shimazu, is a pretty interesting stoneware piece. It doesn't look like clay at all, but in fact it is. I just found this piece to be rather fascinating and interesting to look at, and so I included it in this list. Now here's another interesting sculpture for you to look at. This is Seated Dress with Impressions of Drapery by Karen LeMonte, and it was created out of casting, sandblasted, and acid-etched glass. That is an absolutely fantastic piece, especially right here in front of this awesome window where the light can kind of cascade and move through the piece. It really comes alive in this way. She's known for these life-size glass sculptures of garments, and this one is absolutely fantastic, as you can see. And last but not least is this particular work by Kehinde Wiley, an oil and enamel painting. As an artist, Wiley is known for creating these very interesting portraits with various adornments and almost a royalty sort of aspect that he infuses into it with the props and other things. And these paintings are absolutely monstrous huge. Just a few years ago, he was selected to do a portrait of President Obama that was absolutely amazing, but this one, also amazing, has this interesting pattern that kind of goes to the background and foreground, and this work is relatively new to the collection, and what an awesome addition it is. Scholars, thank you for joining me on that trip. See you on the next one. Have a great day.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought?